This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Well, welcome everybody to this special sponsored show where we're going to be talking all things PE with Phil, Mathe and John Catt Publications. Join in, come and have a chat with us, get your plimsolls on and run to your nearest electrical devices. We can't wait to chat with you. Happiness Factory, a success-driven approach to holistic PE.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Well, hello everybody. How is everybody doing? We're in the middle of the term, so hopefully everybody is okay and you're all getting on really well. Welcome back. Well, I guess you haven't heard from me from a while. I've been a little bit quiet on Teachers Talk Radio, but I am back for this very special, I think we can call it a Twilight show. It is very dark outside, maybe even the midnight show. So getting thick into the winter term, even though it's called the spring term. I've never really understood that. In fact, I had some children today who said to me, when can we start taking our work home? I said, well, in July you can take your work home. And they said, well, when is it July? I said, when it gets warm outside, then you'll know it's July. So, hope you're all managing to keep warm in your classrooms. I certainly am, being in reception, lots of running around. I'm sure Phil will probably have the same response. Back on for one night only for this very special show. In a few moments, I will be talking with Phil about his fabulous book and about all things PE. His fabulous book, which I have had the privilege of being able to have a read of this week, is called The Happiness Factories. Happiness Factories, a success-driven approach to holistic physical education. So it's kind of all about throwing out the old style of PE planning and working towards a more whole child view. So I'm sure Phil will have a much better explanation of what the book is about than I did. I just thought before I introduce Phil, if you're listening in live or if you're listening on a recording, thought it'd be nice just to give him a bit of an introduction, and hopefully he is okay with my introduction. So being one for a bit of onomatopoeia, I think that's right, no, alliteration, I thought we would do 5 facts about Phil. Having done a bit of research and Googled him a bit, I have found out that he's number one. He's been in PE for almost as long as his LinkedIn profile goes back. Not the whole profile, and we'll get into that when I introduce him. I also found out that, yes, Phil is famous. He has been in Rugby World magazine. So maybe we'll get Phil to send Teachers Talk Radio an autograph magazine after our interview. Just kind of a quote from his book, which kind of resonated with me, and maybe it will resonate with all of you as well, is... So Phil believes that PE, and I agree with this, can help children to understand leadership, failure and communication. And I think it kind of links in with everything that we're all doing in schools, is to teach children skills that can be used across any subject. So it's really lovely to hear that PE, which I think is always such a specialised subject, is falling under that umbrella as well. So I think that's really lovely, really nice, very helpful for for the rest of us in teaching our English and our maths and our science and which other subjects you will do. Number 4 was kind of a question that came up in his book, which I thought was quite an interesting one, just for everyone to really think about. Doesn't matter if you teach primary, secondary, higher education, what you teach or what subject, but the question was, do we manipulate pupils into engaging in PE, or do we inspire them? And I think that runs across every subject. You know, are we giving children purpose in everything? And there's a lot of talk about purpose in writing, but I think there should be purpose in everything, and I am a very big fan of lesson hooks. So always wanting to inspire children, and I'm sure all of you are as well. So maybe you can post on our Teachers Talk Radio, post on our Twitter, how do you inspire your children in all your different subjects? I would say the 5th point, so 5 facts about Phil, we are on the 5th one, is that Phil has worked in a variety of countries with children from diverse backgrounds and quite a mixture of cultures. So I'm sure he has seen it all, heard it all. I'm gonna bring him in. So let's see.
Hello.
Hello, Phil.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, thanks very much for having me.
No, not a problem at all. How was the intro? Does that kind of sum you up to begin with?
Yeah, I'm quite impressed, you know, about as much about me as most people do. Rugby world, that's a blast from the past.
Yeah. I guess it's just like kind of wanted to start with just introducing you a bit more and kind of getting an understanding of how you've got to where you are now. So I guess like my first question would be, how did you get into PE as a specialism? Because I'm in primary, and for sure in primary it's seen as a very specialist subject. So I just wonder like how you went down that route from, like I said, your whole LinkedIn profile is not PE. So yeah, like what led you to that subject?
Yeah, I had that fairly typical retrained teacher experience. So I always wanted to be a teacher, and I always wanted to be a PE teacher in particular. I had a really inspiring PE teacher growing up. She made me fall in love with the subject, both practically and academically. And so from the age of about 14, I knew that I wanted to be a PE teacher. I went to university to study sports science with the plan to become a PE teacher, and then life got in the way and other opportunities presented themselves. And I never quite took the leap into teaching after finishing university, and went and did some other things in IT and sales and various other things, and was just assumed that was the way life was going to be. And then I had that really typical kind of second career teacher moment where I was sitting on a train on the way to a meeting in London, and it was raining and it was grey and miserable, and I looked around the carriage and saw all these people buried in newspapers or looking at their mobile phones, and I just sort of thought to myself, I just don't want to do this anymore. This is not how I envisaged life going. So I went home and had an interesting conversation over dinner with my very supportive wife, and explained to her that I still had this burning desire to be a teacher, and that I was going to go and explore how to do it. And so I went down something called the GTP route. So I found a school that was willing to allow me to work and train with them. I took a ridiculous pay cut, but it didn't really feel like a chore or a burden at the time, because I was finally doing the thing that I wanted to do. And I never looked back. And here I am 15, 16 years later, sitting, you were saying that it's dark where you are. It's pitch black where I am, and has been for a while. It's not as cold here as it is where you are, but it's certainly still colder than we would like it to be at this time of year. And it's just about to start raining for the first time in a long time.
Okay, bit of English weather. Mind you.
Yeah,
home.
Exactly. So I am in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia at the moment. So rain is something of a novelty for us here.
Okay, so do you do PE in the rain? Outside in the rain?
We do, actually. We're quite British in our approach to PE. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's raining tomorrow, we'll be out. We're quite lucky. We've got a shade over our AstroTurf pitch, so although I'll be outside, I'll be dry. So
okay. You mentioned like an inspiring PE teacher. How did that kind of get you to like the finish line of PE? Like, in what ways did she inspire you?
She was just one of these people that just had such a passion for what she did, and a passion for imparting that love of her subject onto her pupils. So I was sporty growing up, just like most PE teachers are, and I played rugby and did various other sports recreationally. She just taught us that there was so much more to the subject than just playing sport. And I think that's the bit that's really stuck with me, is I believe that PE is as academic a subject as any, and when it's done properly, it gives you so much more than just an understanding of different sports and games. And I think that stuck with me all the way through. And I still speak to I'll tell you who she was. Her name was Jan Eaton, and I still speak to her now, and she's still, she's retired. She still retains that love for physical education and physical literacy, And yeah, she's still as inspiring now as she ever was.
That's amazing. That like to take it with you all these years.
Well,
Kind of
yeah,
think it just takes that one teacher.
I'm probably older now than she was when she was teaching me PE, which is quite scary to think about. But yeah, I like to think that what she gave to me is very similar to what I'm trying to give to pupils in the generation that I'm working with now.
It sounds that way from like the comment you just made about like there's more to the subject than just playing sport. I noticed that was kind of one of the quotes from your book, actually.
Yeah, I think it's very easy, especially for people that aren't in PE, to see PE from a surface level, where we do talk about sport, we do talk about games and technique and skills and tactics and all these things that you associate on the surface with sport, but there's so much more to PE in terms of how our bodies work and how our bodies feel, and how we can work with our bodies to make all sorts of other things within our lives better or improve them, and we can use sport as a vehicle to teach physical literacy, but it's just one vehicle and there are many other ways of doing it as well.
Yeah, I think like kind of leading on from you talking about your inspirational PE teacher, I think a lot of the times we're inspired by older teachers, and I know for sure I've taught lessons that I was taught as a kid, but I wonder like how do you remember experiencing PE as a child, and how has that kind of led you to change your practice a little bit for the children that you teach?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's a question that comes up a lot when we're talking to PE people. That thing about what is your why? And it's not just PE.
Yes.
We don't just talk about our why in PE, do we? We talk about it in all forms of education, and really understanding why we do what we do, and how our why shifts and changes as we grow as educators and as cohorts of pupils come and go. My why when I first set out to be a PE teacher, if I'm completely honest, is probably the same as lots of PE teachers. It's because I loved being physically active, and I wanted more people to be physically active, and teaching PE seemed like the best way to give over that love of physical activity to as many people as possible. As I've evolved as an educator, and I really do see myself as an educator first and foremost, rather than a PE teacher. And you said that you had a chance to read through some of the book, and I think one of the things that I'm most proud of is the fact that although it is a book about PE and it's to a relatively niche audience, a lot of the messages echo across all sorts of subjects, and right the way through from primary school right the way up to higher education. And the messages that we're giving out as kind of PE pioneers is not that different to the message that people are giving in the evolution of other subjects as well. So now my why is about imparting life skills and looking at children in holistic ways, and trying to see avenues to give them more than just an understanding of physical skills and a load of different sports, but how do we encourage them to be better communicators? How do we encourage them to be able to take on different roles within groups? And how do we encourage those ones that have a natural tendency to lead to want to go on and take leadership roles? How do we build resilience within pupils when things are not necessarily going the way they want them to? How can they develop that growth mindset that will then support them in trying times? And these are all things that PE can do really well when you move away from that really traditional narrow focus of I must teach this group of children these 6 sports over the course of a year.
Yeah, I go back to how you said you kind of started out with PE as a subject about just like loving being physically active, and we have a trainee teacher in our school at the moment, and I said to her that if you won't enjoy the activity that you're putting out, can you expect the kids to? And I guess that links quite well to kind of your chosen subject, do you think? Yeah,
no, completely. I think you can be a PE teacher without being a high level sporting performer yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that natural desire to be active, that natural desire to move, and that desire to use your body in whether it's sporting or other physical activities. I think that's really important, because if you can show that inspiration in yourself, then your pupils are going to feed off of that. And you have to role model in a subject like PE. You don't necessarily have to still be an active, regular participant in team sports or in a particular type of individual activity, but you have to be able to show that love for healthy living, for participating in physical activity, looking after yourself, all of those things, because the pupils that you're working with will look to you as the example of what it should look like. And I guess that's the same in lots of subjects. English teachers need to be able to inspire through a love of literature, and it's effectively the same principle, isn't it? It's you've got to be able to inspire in whatever way you choose to do that. You have to be able to pass on that desire to participate.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting, like it leads on to my next question very well, is that the way you describe it as a subject kind of shows that to teach it is teaching kind of the same skill sets and in the same manner that you would teach any subject. So I guess my question, and especially like in England, I think, and in the schools that I've taught in, that why do you think PE has become like such a specialised subject that a coach has to come in and teach it and it can't be the class teacher?
It's a really interesting one, isn't it? Especially in primary education. It's and it's very current as well, because and I haven't taught in the UK for a while now, but obviously I'm still in contact with lots of PE teachers in the UK and still working with PE departments in the UK, and you see it all the time. You see the nervousness in non-PE specialists in taking PE because there is that perception that somehow you have to be a good sports person and you have to understand all these sports and you have to be able to teach children how to play all these sports in order to be able to do it. And actually, when you really break it down, what we really want to be doing is we want to be encouraging these children to move in lots of different ways and understand what it feels like when they move. We want to teach them some fundamental things that will help them with functional movement later on in life. So we want them to be able to walk and to run and to be able to change direction without falling over. And we want them to be able to throw an object and catch an object. I'm doing a lot of work with Year 6 at the moment on simply throwing and catching, and there's no sport related to it whatsoever, but that fundamental skill of throwing and catching and the gross and fine motor skills involved in that translates across to all sorts of other areas. The holding of a pen or the holding of a pencil or the picking up of equipment or the gathering all your belongings after lunch and taking them back inside all requires similar bodily control to throwing a tennis ball and catching a tennis ball. So I don't think you have to, I guess if I could sit in front of a lot of primary school teachers especially, I would say you don't have to be nervous about PE, because you don't have to be an expert in 25 different sports in order to be able to teach the children and work with the children and support the children as they learn these really fundamental movement skills and understand why those movements are so important to them. So I think that answers your question. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. I also wonder if it comes from a little lack of subject knowledge, because, thinking as a primary teacher, like thinking about maybe planning like an English, unit of work, is that I guess a lot of, I did a PGCE, so similar to you, I think, but I would imagine that a lot of primary trained teachers maybe got a lot more English training, maths training than PE training. So I wonder if sometimes does it come from a lack of subject knowledge of, okay, I want to teach a child how to catch, but I don't know where to begin in terms of like breaking it down into smaller parts,
It absolutely does. And if you look at the stats around the amount of time given over to initial teacher education, specific in PE, it's almost non-existent now. A couple of hours over the course of a teacher training is simply not enough. It's not necessarily just to do with the skills, but it's the confidence to actually then go on and deliver that. And you can picture the newly qualified primary school teacher going into the hall with their Year 4 class for the first time, and all the children are in their PE kit and they're all super excited about PE, and I would imagine it's a very intimidating scenario. I still get those butterflies when I'm starting a new unit with a junior school class now, and I've been doing this for best part of 2 decades. So the more practice that initial teacher trainees are given, the more confidence they're going to go into that first lesson with. But if you concentrate on the things that you understand, then you can't go far wrong. So starting off with simple movements, hopping, skipping, jumping, those are things that most adults can do. And we can start there, and it snowballs. And once you get that confidence that actually I can do this, then all of a sudden you realize you can do all sorts of other things as well.
I think as adults we take for granted all those simple movements that we can do.
Completely. No, we do, don't we? We call them functional movements in PE now at the moment, and it is those things that you use in your day-to-day life. Lifting shopping bags, carrying things in from the car, carrying your 2-year-old toddler, pushing a shopping trolley. These are skills that we have learnt as adults, but we've got to have learnt the functional movements in order to be able to do those things. And I think when we look at things like the obesity issues and the lack of movement and the lack of people taking part in physical activity, a lot of that stems from not having those functional movement skills to be confident enough to say, no, I can go and do this. I can go out for a walk, or I can go out for a jog, or I can go to the gym, or I can go and have a kickabout with my child in the park. If you don't have those fundamental initial building blocks, then you're always going to be one step behind. So giving those to children at a young age is so vitally important. It's far more important to impart those bits of learning and those bits of education than it is teaching them how to hold a hockey stick.
Yeah, no, I agree completely, and I think you're right. The phrase building blocks is one that, if you need to be able to break it down, you need to know how you kind of get to the end point. But I like to make the comparison in maths to the idea of column addition, and of how many parents have said to me when I was teaching Year 2, can't you just teach them column addition? And I think probably it translates to PE as well, is that I know I can catch a ball, but I don't remember all the steps before that I was taught. And I think it kind of crosses subject boundaries, that kind of idea of I can do it, but I don't remember how I was taught to do it because it was so long ago,
and you can reel off thousands of examples across adulthood where we just do things on instinct, don't we? And actually we forget that there was a process to get to that point.
Yes.
And throwing and catching the ball is the best example. There's a whole series of movements involved in throwing a tennis ball against the wall, and each of those is critical towards that final outcome. And that's exactly the same in maths, or it's exactly the same in understanding how to formulate sentences, or be able to talk about to be able to compare different periods in history. Every subject has that. It's all about building blocks, and if the building blocks for PE are those fundamental movement skills, then really that's got to be the starting point for everything that we do. And now I talk in the book quite a lot about fundamental movement skills and breaking activities down into their basic elements before trying to deliver an entire skill within a sporting context, which a lot of the time to a lot of children is completely alien. I used the example talking to somebody a week or so ago about rotations in volleyball. Okay, so
right.
You can spend ages teaching children about how rotations, which is how you move around the court each time you've had a service in volleyball. It's intricately complicated, and there's all sorts of tactics, and you're never going to use it in adulthood unless you play volleyball. So why are we spending time in Key Stage 3 PE teaching rotations in volleyball when we could be teaching them how to jump, hop, skip, run, catch or throw? And I think if we can, I'm not saying that, and it makes me sound like I'm saying there is no place for sport in PE, and that's absolutely, of course, not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we need to really look at these fundamental skills first and prioritize those instead of trying to teach the children explicit sports that perhaps have no relation to the world in which they're functioning in.
Yeah, no, but I agree, like 100%. I kind of I want to go and introduce the book now. So it's called The Happiness Factories, a success-driven approach to holistic physical education. I wanted to go with just the first question of like maybe what or who inspired you to write it.
So Happiness Factories. Happiness Factories came about in the 2 years prior to COVID, and it started off as a series of just kind of rambly, either journal, diary articles that I was trying to keep a journal, a sort of a gratitude journal of my time working in Cairo in Egypt, and it sort of morphed into trying to ask myself questions and answer questions about why I was doing what I was doing, why were we as a PE department doing certain things. And then I got a bit more keen on the idea of writing, so I started writing blog articles for various publications or websites. And then I looked at it one day and thought, I've actually got something tangible here that I could put together. And that was where the idea for Happiness Factories came about. And then I was one of the fortunate people that was able to use lockdown and the periods of time during COVID for a little bit of kind of personal time. And I tried to put it all together, and Happiness Factories is what came out as a result of it. And the other thing was that I was, during COVID and in the period immediately preceding COVID, I was working internationally in PE, starting to talk to other teachers who were working internationally in PE, and began to realize that there were all these people out there, whether they were British trained teachers or American or Australian trained teachers, all out there battling with fundamentally the same questions about our subject that I was. What is it about? Are we really doing it in the most effective way? And I started to learn from all of these other PE teachers about the approaches that they were taking to things and their idea as what PE could be, understanding their perception of what we when we talk about holistic education, what did that mean in a PE context? And I thought there was a really good opportunity to make Happiness Factories more than just 40,000 of my words, but other people's stories as well. And so you'll see throughout the book there are reflections and commentaries and case studies from teachers all over the world, and it really became a platform for them to have a voice. I think as British trained PE teachers, we always look towards home for our inspiration, and I sometimes think we forget that there are thousands of highly trained, highly experienced, UK trained, qualified PE teachers and teachers in general working all over the world, effectively doing the same thing that all the PE teachers in the UK are doing. And they don't really have a platform, or they didn't really have a platform to have their stories told. And I decided that I wanted it to be more than just my story. And I think the thing that I'm most proud about with Happiness Factories is that it gave so many people a platform to tell really inspiring stories about what they're doing in their context.
What does holistic mean in terms of a PE? I don't want to say like PE planning, but I feel like more in terms of a PE thought process for a lesson.
Yeah, so it's funny. It changes depending on who you speak to. So the word holistic for me means looking at the whole child, and not just the physical bit of the child. And it's one of these terms that's bandied around education in many different forms, isn't it? But I think that's what, if I had to write a definition of what holistic means to me, it means looking at a child as a whole entity and not just a physical being. So it's looking at all of those character traits. It's looking at all of those things that make up well-rounded young people and then well-rounded adults. So how well can you communicate? How well can you process cognitively? How well can you recall information on demand? And how well can you problem solve? And then how can you interact socially with other people? And can you take on different roles within group dynamics? Can you work individually on a task, and can you work with other people on a task? And then you lump that in with those fundamental movement skills that we talked about and some sporting knowledge, if that fits in with your curriculum, and you look at their physical well-being and their mental well-being, how resilient they are, how much of a growth mindset do they have, and all of those things together make up a rounded individual. And if you can deliver a PE curriculum that touches on all of those things, then I would argue that you are being very holistic in your approach. And again, it's not unique to PE, is it? It's something that we talk about in schools in many different contexts within our schools. But I think traditionally PE was very much a physical skill based subject. And I think we're now moving towards something that imparts far more than just physical skills. And I think that's really valuable. And in a world where lots of people question the value of PE, I think that as long as you can deliver it in a physically rich environment, and something that I'm very passionate about when I talk to people about PE is that it must be a movement-driven subject. There is no substitute for getting children moving, because it's so important, because for a lot of them it'll be the only time during their day that they do move moderately intensely. But we can deliver all of these things through that physical medium. Why wouldn't we? Why would we not want to develop all of those other parts to our pupils and support the learning that's going on in other areas of the school as well? Quite often PE is seen as a bit of a silo on its own. People look at PE teachers differently from all other teachers, but ultimately we're all teachers. We're all working within a school, and we're all trying to do our bit towards a whole, which is to develop leavers, whether that's leaving at the end of year 6 or leaving at the end of year 11 or 13 or leaving university, or even adult learners. We're all trying to get those children or those learners to a certain point, and PE can play a really important role in that. So let's use it as a vehicle to deliver more than just some physical sporting skills, and reap the benefits of that across all sorts of different areas of the school.
I kind of wanted to ask, how do you, for all students, put the idea of PE and happiness together? And I just have this image in my mind. At one of the schools I worked at, we used to do the daily mile. So straight after assembly, we had a massive field at my old school. They used to walk to the field and do a few laps. And I just remember this kind of 1 year 6 boy. I could see him going to hide in the toilet, or just cowering away from the physical exercise. So I wonder, like I said, how do you link PE and happiness for every child, if we're thinking about it holistically?
The daily mile is an interesting one. It's a bit like Marmite or English mustard, isn't it? It's you either love it, you love it, or you hate it. And lots of people place real value on things like the daily mile, because it's giving children the opportunity to exercise. And I think that is absolutely important, and it has its place, but also it's a very, very narrow-minded view of exercise, isn't it? Let's all make the children walk or run for 5 laps of the school field is possibly counterintuitive if we're trying to inspire children to want to move. But every child is individual. Every child is individual, and every child has a unique set of characteristics that we need to understand, and we need to work with in order to inspire them. And we inspire every child in different ways. And again, that's something that every single teacher, regardless of what subject they work in, will know. That each child within your class is a unique individual and needs to be treated as such. And PE is absolutely no different. And for too long, we taught to the top in PE, and some people will argue that they didn't do that, but the majority of PE was always taught to the middle to top end of classes, and we were trying to drive all the children up to a level that perhaps wasn't appropriate for them. And I think now modern, and actually, when you hear all those horror stories that people tell you about why they hated PE, it was either because of showers, gym knickers, or a shouty PE teacher, or more likely it was because they were being asked to do things that at that time in their life they didn't feel confident or capable of doing. Now we take a much more evidence-based, research-based approach to PE. We understand that different children need to develop in different ways and need to be stimulated in different ways. And not every child is as enthused by team sports, and not every child wants to go and run a mile around a field for their exercise. So in my school, we introduced things like, we're lucky enough to have a swimming pool. We've introduced things like water polo and aqua aerobics, and we've just introduced skateboarding at lunchtime, and we're looking at rollerblading club, and we've introduced all these things that are not your traditional sports in order to try and capture that inspiration, that spark moment, the children that like to do other things. I remember when I was at school that we would dread the time when it was gymnastics term and we all had to go and do gymnastics. And I'm sure there were children within that class for whom that was the only term that they really were inspired by. And all the other ones where they had to go out and throw rugby balls around or kick footballs or play basketball, that wasn't the bit that inspired them. But that gymnastics term, which I thought was the bit that didn't fit with me, may well have fitted other people. So we can't just look at our classes as a whole. We have to break them down into their individuals and find the thing that inspires that child. It's all about creating a spark. And our primary job as PE teachers is to generate a spark within each individual child that makes them say, that's something I think I might like to do again. Because doing it again leads to doing it again and again. And then eventually, hopefully, that leads to them wanting to go on and do that activity or something similar throughout the rest of their lives. And I think you can't do that unless you understand each child, you understand what motivates them within your subject, and then you deliver that opportunity to each child in a slightly different way.
Yeah, you're right. It reminds me of my PE days in high school, like walking into the gym and seeing badminton nets up and shuttlecocks and wishing they were tennis rackets and tennis nets. So,
yeah, exactly.
Like wishing every day there'd be a tennis net and not a badminton net. I think like we see children a lot differently now to when a lot of us went to school, and I think it sounds, your PE provision sounds amazing, but I also like, it's nice that it kind of matches what's going on in PE in like the outside world and in the professional world, because I feel like even in the Olympics, the selection of sports is changing slowly. So, you know, we always talk about like teaching real life in a classroom, and that shows is just as important as any classroom as it is in a PE classroom, PE lesson.
No, absolutely. I wrote an article that got picked up by a magazine a little while ago now about the idea that the next generation are coming, and you know the children are coming, and if we don't listen to them, not just as PE teachers, but as you know the current grown-up generation, if we don't appreciate that the things that the children of today are inspired by, relate to, want to do, are enthused by, are different to the things that we were, then we're just not going to relate to them. So, you know, the Winter Olympics with the snowboarders and the ski moguls and all of these things that my children, who are all teenagers, sat and watched and mesmerised by.
Yeah.
And you look at the Olympics with the skateboarders and the BMX, and that's what's inspiring them. So why on earth are we not doing that to inspire them to want to move?
Yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
If the choice is between getting on a skateboard or sitting on your phone, then surely getting on your skateboard at lunchtime is the better option. So if in our schools we give them the opportunity to do that, instead of just eat their lunch or sit on their phones if they're allowed phones, or just sit and talk, then let's get them on their skateboards. What harm is it going to do?
Yeah.
And the other thing is, anything that we can do, and if anybody's listening to this and is an avid footballer, then I apologise. I'm not picking on football particularly. But anything we can do that reduces that toxic masculinity of boys kicking footballs around playgrounds whilst girls stand on the sidelines and watch because they can't get involved because they don't feel they have a place. Yeah. Anything we can do to remove that from our schools is critical, because it's been there in the background all for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, and absolutely.
No school should be an environment in which that is acceptable. So let's go and find other things for these children to want to do. Three of the kids that were skateboarding today on the playground were girls, and 3 of them were boys, and it was great. And why shouldn't it be like that?
Absolutely, yeah. It's funny because I think that like the Olympic legacy lived on till now. I think that's why we have coaches. Maybe, I don't know, but it seems like the women's FA Cup win has kind of gone quiet. So it's interesting, like the gender split in PE as a subject, or as, like you say, as a break time game.
And I think I'm going to stand up for PE teachers across the UK and across the world and say, we are not the PE teachers that our parents had, and you know, we have a much more modern outlook on life, and there are some outstanding PE teachers at the very forefront of gender equality within schools and doing fantastic work on all sorts of things to do with equity of provision. And we are so much further forward in what is a really challenging environment for some of those issues. We are so much further forward than perhaps people give us credit for. And I don't believe there's any PE teachers that will listen to this at some point in the future who aren't thinking these things, who aren't considering them, who aren't actively out there looking for opportunities for genuine equality within their provision, because it's so important to us as PE teachers that every child, it doesn't matter what gender they are, what their cultural background is, what their race is, how they identify, it's irrelevant. They should all feel safe enough to want to go and do something physical with their bodies that gets them moving, that they enjoy, because fundamentally as human beings, that's what we're designed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to delve right into the book, but before that, I hope it's okay, we were just going to take a little news and ad break, and then I'm going to straight into a couple of quotes from the book. So I will mute you just for a sec and then bring you back in.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The Christian Institute website carries a story on the reminder by Minister of State for Schools Nick Gibb that schools in England have a duty to remain politically impartial in their teaching and extracurricular activities. The guidance was published last year, but Mr Gibb was responding to MP Miriam Cates' references to a YouGov poll, which appears to reveal that the majority of UK children are being taught political ideology as fact, and he issued the reminder. Ms Cates was referencing a view that children are being taught that they can be born in the wrong body, as well as resources being used in schools which focus on the topic of gender identity. The DfE guidance comes as Scotland attempts to introduce new legislation on gender recognition, which is opposed by Westminster. The guidance states that schools should not under any circumstances work with or use materials produced by external agencies that take extreme political positions. The Varsity website reports on findings by a right-wing think tank that elite universities were more likely to use progressive terminology on their websites. Cambridge tops the table in the Radical Progressive University Guide, although the think tank Civitas does not appear to see this as a positive. Varsity highlights comments reported in the Daily Mail, which warned that half of our universities peddle their woke agenda to students. The think tank generated the findings after exploring university websites and news reports, looking for a series of key phrases including trigger warning, white privilege, and anti-racism. Those with high incidences of key phrases were at the top of the table. Varsity acknowledges a view that Cambridge's political culture is to the left of the national one, but also highlights key figures in academia who feature prominently in the conservative press. It's hard to stay away from politics as announcements of strikes continued late last week. The TES reports on the continued deadlock in Scotland, whilst the Evening Standard covers talks between ministers and unions in England after the NEU confirmed strike dates for the coming weeks and months. These strikes are set to impact schools in England and Wales, although the BBC further reports on talks in Wales. Its news website reports that teachers and school leaders have been offered a one-off payment by the Welsh Government, similar to that offered to health workers, although unions have already said that the offer is not enough. Scottish media outlets have also carried a story about what it describes as fears about violence in schools. A clip, now widely shared on social media, shows an altercation between two students and that took place on the same day a male pupil was left unconscious following an assault. Whilst Police Scotland have said it's investigating both incidents, it has sparked debate on the state of behaviour in schools, particularly as such incidents have featured in headlines before. The Scottish Government has previously stated they're investing an additional £15 million this year to enhance capacity, to effectively meet the needs of young people, and that they were very clear that violence is unacceptable. In further political news, the petition put forward by three men known as the Three Dads Walking will go to Parliament. The men, who all lost daughters to suicide, want to get suicide prevention on the school curriculum. The petition they set up now has more than 155,000 signatures, which means that it will be discussed in Parliament, after previously failing to be heard. Finally, more than 20,000 defibrillators will be sent to almost 18,000 state-funded schools by the end of the academic year. It comes after the government committed to ensuring there was a device in every school last year. The rollout comes after campaigning from the Oliver King Foundation and its founder Mark King, whose son died at 12 from a cardiac arrest while swimming at school. Guidance to support schools has been created, including awareness videos. And Education Secretary Gillian Keegan praised the work of the Oliver King Foundation and described the rollout as a huge milestone. Mr. King stated, "Defibrillators save lives," and that he hoped that families do not have to suffer the heartbreak of unnecessarily losing a child. This is for our Ollie. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, a while ago I asked you what is your go-to piece of tech. This week I had the pleasure of talking to Ian Kenyon, CEO of Wirral Respite and Alternative Provision, also known as RAP for short. So, Ian, what is your go-to piece of tech in your setting?
Thanks, Steve. In our organisation, we are absolutely embedded in sharing our information and our data via the cloud. And there's loads of software out there to do it. And there's a lot of bespoke software for our type of organisation, student information management services, the likes of SIMS or Arbor or things like that. But unfortunately, they're all built around big organisations, big schools, schools with up to 1,200 students. Certainly not for schools that have a turnaround of students who are completing courses in 12 weeks, and those students who are potentially returning but require new files. We've tried proprietary software. It's very, very expensive. But actually what we've fallen back to is what Google provides. Using G Suite, which is now Google Workplace, we have access to spreadsheets, to form filling software for data collection, Google Docs, which is, you're very familiar with everything via traditional Microsoft Offices. Being able to link docs and sheets and forms together has been almost transformational for our organisation. It's not the cheapest, I will say. The per user price matches what other software like Zoho or Microsoft will do, but offers a simpler version for us, and offers us some interactivity that we've never had before. It handles our email, it handles our student information, so gathering attendance, it handles our finance, so invoicing. The way that the suite works, the way that the package works, just works really well for us, but with very little additional investment in time, effort and training. Google offers us everything that we need. The final sort of element that has been transformational for us is then being able to use proprietary hardware such as Chromebooks or even Android phones, and the ability for us to then transfer our data and to be live in the cloud at all times has been a really good thing for our organisation. So there you have it, my number one go-to. It's definitely got to be Google Workplace.
Thank you, Ian. As always, I'd love to hear what you want to know about tech. Do you have a go-to piece of tech? Let us know at TT Radio Official. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hi, Phil.
Hi.
Thanks for waiting. So I'm going to go straight in with a quote that I picked out from page 11 of your book, which is in the foreword. It says that physical activities and sports can deliver truly relevant learning. They can contribute to the understanding of leadership, failure, communication, and much more. And I guess the word that stuck out for me is the word to do with failure. And I think kind of, what do you say to like the children or the parents, or maybe even some of the other educators out here that would have this idea of everybody should win, and then you kind of get some of the parents, why didn't my child win? How do you balance that?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So in a book that is predominantly saying that our PE curriculum should be success driven, I wanted to use the word failure quite early on in the book, because I think it could be perceived that what I'm saying is there's no such thing as failure, and of course there's failure. It's because failure is part of life, isn't it? And we have to face failure in lots of different forms, in lots of different times throughout our lives, and I think it's important that we teach children how to confront the situations where things don't go quite as well as we want them to, and how we take positives from situations that perhaps don't get the outcomes that we were aspiring to, and how we develop that kind of growth mindset approach to things. I think for me, the key to approaching failure, especially with younger children, is to try and find the success in the failure. And I liken it to stepping stones across a river. So some people will tell you that success is getting to the other side of the riverbank without putting your foot in the water and getting wet. But you could equally say every time you reach the next stepping stone, you're being successful. And so I guess it depends on how we frame success and how we frame failure with our pupils. And we can make failure something that we don't need to be scared of, because we can see it as just the final outcome in a series of successes. And we can look back from the point of perceived failure to all the things that went well in the build up to that. You know, to give you a PE example, I might not be able to do a layup in basketball, but I can get the foot patterns right. I can move my body in the right angle. I may just not have the upper body strength to get the ball high enough to go into the basket yet, because I haven't developed quite as much as other children of my age. That perceived failure of not getting the ball in the basket was was the final piece of a series of successes that we as PE teachers and teachers in general within their subjects can use to still inspire children to want to try again, to want to try harder, to want to try a different approach to something. There's nothing wrong with failure, but if we can find the successes within that failure that then makes the child go, oh, okay, well, I was pretty close, so actually I'm going to have another go. Or, okay, I understand why I didn't get that outcome I was looking for, so I'm just going to try and change something slightly and give it another go. And I think that's what we're trying to say with the book, is that success is really important, because success is the thing that makes children want to try again over and over again until we create habits.
Yeah, I think it kind of all meshes together with also the point of, like, it's not just about learning a sport, and just because you can't play the sport doesn't mean you can't find successes in parts of a sport, or parts of a skill, like the journey of a skill.
Exactly. And
I think it leads nicely into the next quote, which made me think of it, like one of the kids that I've taught before, which page 51 says, we have developed educational systems that place great emphasis on the development and retention of knowledge. The importance of physical knowledge for survival has diminished as the world has evolved and life has become less physically demanding. And I mean, we 100% see that in early years and in reception and in nursery, of, like no pincer grip and no upper body. Like, I think it's probably strange to some to think of a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old having upper body strength, but if a child never had the opportunity to crawl, we're already like missing a massive building block when it comes to PE. And I wonder, like, in the iPad era, how do we change that?
Yeah, and it could not be any more visible than it is at the moment as we come back out of 2 years of effective inactivity, isn't it? And within our school, we've done a huge amount of work on individual intervention with children for that exact reason, that some of the development stages that they should have gone through, they were just sitting at home looking at a computer screen. And so it's critical, isn't it? It's absolutely fundamental to getting these children to where we want them to be at the next transition point in their lives, that we've got to try and fill some of these gaps that occur. And it is true, we live in a world where inactivity is acceptable, and we weren't designed anatomically and biologically to live in that world. We were designed to be hunter-gatherers who wouldn't eat for days at a time, and would have to still hunt for our food and forage for our food. And now we sit on the sofa and we phone Deliveroo, and the food gets delivered to our door. So it's no wonder, is it, that we are seeing the consequences of living a life that isn't really suited to the biological makeup of our human bodies. How do we deal with that? I think it's about finding ways to encourage the children to want to move. And it keeps coming back to that idea of encouraging them to move in different ways. And again, when you put the emphasis on the sport, then perhaps what you're doing is alienating the children for whom sport is not a motivator. But if you put the emphasis on fun movement skills and fun activities that require them to move, then all of a sudden you're not just capturing the ones that enjoy moving and want to run around, but you're actually getting the ones that perhaps wouldn't do that in a sporting context. Dancing. So we put music on in our PE lessons all the time, for no more reason a lot of the time than just the children won't stand still. Especially in primary school, they just won't stand still. They'll just jiggle and move and jump around. And that movement...
That's great, I love that.
That movement is critical. And literally all we're doing is just putting Spotify playlists on. We're not really having to teach anything. We're just enhancing their experience by just putting some music on. And all of a sudden there's jiggling and there's jumping and there's things happening that aren't necessarily part of the lesson, but are getting those children to move in different ways and encouraging that desire to move. So yeah, so if you're a teacher listening to this
Love
who's
that.
thinking about their next PE lesson, get the stereo
Yeah.
out and just put some music on, and you'll be
Yeah,
amazed.
brilliant.
Another brilliant
Yeah.
one aimed at primary teachers specifically. If you want to do something that isn't PE or sport related, just YouTube Just Dance videos and put them on. It's extraordinary.
Mhm.
You put a Just Dance
Yeah.
video on and you watch the children and they just come to life. It doesn't matter who they are.
Yeah.
They all want to do it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I like that. That's going to be my new PE mantra. Just put music on. The next one, which I think we've talked around quite a bit, is the bottom of page 81. Talks about success. Says success is a permanently moving creature, evolving with us and changing as the context we find ourselves in also changes. Could you maybe just expand on that a little bit? Because I feel like I know what it looks like in English, and I can possibly picture it in PE, but I think it's an interesting quote for, children to realise that maybe there isn't always an end goal, or, the successes are always coming, kind of thing.
Yeah, and obviously I put it into a PE context within the book,
sure.
But again, it's a much bigger thing than just PE, isn't it? Is that if success is a finite end goal, where do we go after that? And if there's a certain number of things that have had to have been done in order to achieve that success, then surely there needs to be a whole load more things done before the next time you get to feel success. And actually, is that the right approach to children developing, or should we be encourage an environment where success is being recognized and celebrated and praised constantly? A bit like we talk about children developing constantly and learning, evolving with the child, as opposed to being very static learning. It's the same with success. We want the success to always be just in front of where that child's development point is. So they're constantly striving for the next bit of success, but then they're also achieving the next bit of success. So we're giving them the carrot in order to just keep them moving forward all the time. And in a PE context, that is just small changes, small increases in challenge, small changes in a piece of equipment, or identifying the child that is slightly further ahead or perhaps needs slightly more support, and changing the desired outcome so that they can achieve it with a little bit of effort. And so that gives them the motivation to want to go on and do it again, or do it better, or do it differently. And I think that's the same in any subject. I am as I said earlier on, I'm a PE teacher, but I'm an educator, and I'm fascinated in all types of education, in all subject areas. And I think the same thing applies. And I think a lot of these things that I talk about in a PE context are really the same in everybody else's subjects.
Absolutely, yeah. No, definitely. I really like you've got on page 84 a visual a visual way to explain the successes in PE and possibly in any subject. And it's ambition plus attainment plus achievement equals success and happiness. How did you come up with that? I think it's a great way I think it's a good kind of motto for any subject, really.
I can't say that there was any particular kind of deep philosophical, mathematical thinking into coming up with this formula. I had to give a presentation to some PE teachers in Southeast Asia about the idea of success in PE and what it looked like, and I was trying to work out how I encourage, or how we encourage, children to feel successful. And it is that idea of them being ambitious, them wanting to achieve something, them wanting to feel success. If they don't want to feel successful, then you're initially up against a real barrier to them making progress. So you've got to create an environment in which they're ambitious to make progress. And then you've got to ensure that they actually are making some progress, because children are not silly. If you praise them constantly for things that they know that they're actually not doing, then you're immediately, the relationship is not going to be as positive as it could be. So you've got to be very good at identifying where attainment happens, where a child achieves something, and then recognizing that and explicitly recognizing it to that child so that they feel a sense of achievement. And those three things together make them feel like they're being successful. And a successful child, a child that feels that they're successful, will be happy within their environment. Because at the end of the day, and you teach early years, so you'll know this more than most, children want to show you that they can do things. And, I teach from FS1 through to year 13. So I see the whole spectrum. And up to about year 2, year 3, it's constant. I can do this. Look what I can do. Let me show you what I can do. Look, sir, I did this. Because they want you to praise them for the things that they can do. And so let's do that, because give them the praise. Tell them that they're doing something really well. Tell them what they're doing so they can make those neurological links between, I did this, Mr. Mathe said it was really good, I'm going to do it again, or I'm going to remember how to do it. That makes them happy. And surely we want children in our schools to be happy, to feel happy. And they feel happy when they feel like they're being successful. They feel happy because of lots of other things as well, friendship groups and lots of fresh air and climbing frames and all sorts of other things make them happy, but success makes children happy, so let's make them feel successful.
It leads on really nicely to the next quote of now we are moving away from just identifying success in terms of physical performance. So what would you say if you were to branch PE off into maybe 3 or 4 different areas? What are the different areas that we look for success in PE?
So I think one of the most important ones, and I wrote my master's thesis on this, is the idea of children collaborating with each other, because we live in a world where everybody works in teams. We live in a world where collaboration exists in almost every job role, every profession. People work with people more than we ever have done before. 100 years ago, people worked in factories that were too noisy for anyone to be able to talk to each other, and they sat at a machine and they did the same thing over and over again 500 times and then went home. Now we all sit on computers and try and interact with other human beings all over the world to sell things to each other or to develop new products, and it's all teamwork. And if we don't teach children how to work together effectively, positively, then we're not skilling them with the tools that they're going to need when they go on into adulthood. So collaboration for me is absolutely critical, and PE can do that in a unique way that you cannot really do in any other subject when you're sitting at desks. I think that resilience is a tricky one, and there's quite a lot of debate within PE circles about what do we mean when we say we're teaching resilience. And some people will tell you that we shouldn't be trying to teach resilience, or that we should be teaching resilience by letting children fail. And it's a slightly tricky conversation to have, because people have very polarized views. But I just think teaching children to identify the successes in their perceived failures is really important, because we want children to be mentally and emotionally stable. And I think that's part of that comes with being able to be positive about yourself and to see the good things you do as a human being. And again, that's something that we can teach children to do at a really young age. And then that just follows them through. And when things do get challenging, either at school or later on in life, we have coping mechanisms. And again, PE is a really good place to teach that, because we're not always successful in PE. We don't always hit 3-pointers in basketball or score penalties in football. That's the nature of what we do. So it's a really good place to teach those coping mechanisms. And then the third one is probably, if you don't look at the kind of the fundamental physical movement skills, I think the third one is I could pick about four and say they were my third one. Leadership, I think, is really important. I think, again, a bit like collaboration, we live in a world where being able to lead situations is really important. But possibly I perceive that as more important because of the nature of the type of school that I work in and the importance that's placed on leadership skills within international schools. I don't know whether or not that would have the same level of focus in schools in the UK, but I do think that understanding different leadership styles, understanding how you can be a servant leader and, you can lead for the benefit of other people. I think those are really important kind of social skills that if we can teach children how to be a conscientious leader, a leader through thought and a leader through action, then I think that's a really valuable skill.
Definitely. I guess the next one, I think we've spoken a bit about failure, and you mentioned that we shouldn't eliminate any experience of failure within any subject, but PE especially. So I think, are those skills like leadership, being resilient, that you would teach explicitly in PE, or is it kind of more you wait for moments to arise where you can maybe do it on like a one-to-one or like a one-to-a-group kind of basis?
I think there are different approaches. Different PE teachers will take slightly different approaches. Some of it depends on what your curriculum is. But the school that I currently work in, we teach the international middle years curriculum in Key Stage 3, which lends itself really well to teaching some of those things explicitly. And our Key Stage 4 curriculum is all designed around those fundamental concepts. So we teach a unit of leadership, we teach a unit of collaboration. But equally, it's really powerful when you put them all into the pot all together and you teach a lesson and you pick out the ones that the child is doing well, and you identify that Sarah did this particular thing, and Sarah collaborated really well, so you go and you tell her that she did that. And then Thomas showed a bit of leadership in his group, so you go and tell him he did that. And then Justin, perhaps he wasn't quite so successful with his badminton service, but he tried again and he tried again, and eventually he got it. Well, there's your resilience. And if you can pick these things out, then you're hitting lots of different markers all in one lesson, aren't you? So there are different ways to do it. I think as long as you do it, how you do it is probably less important than trying to hit as many of these markers and impart all of these different pieces of learning as often as you can.
Yeah, I think I was just like mentioning about the me in PE model and what that looks like, and I guess how you've adapted it to work as a more holistic model.
Yeah, so I can't take any of the credit for it whatsoever. It was created by somebody far smarter in these things than me, Tom Brush. But I don't currently use it in the school that I'm working in now. Ironically, I changed schools over the summer, so it was my previous school that is the one from Happiness Factories, and the case study in the back is actually of the school that I've just moved on from. But we took me in PE as the inspiration, but we worked in a very unique context within the UAE, and our student demographic was very different to the kind of demographics in the schools that normally would be using me in PE. And so we needed to adapt it, and what we did was we took the fundamental components of it, and then we looked at which bits we felt would most suit our pupils in our context, and we adapted a few bits, which is exactly what Tom would want you to do with me in PE. And he brilliantly agreed to contribute some words and some reflections to the book, and he actually effectively says that it provides the framework from which you can then go and be creative yourselves. So we made our own version of it and created our own our ways of visualizing it, and the chart at the back of the book shows how we sort of took the four me and PE concepts, and they expanded them outwards into something that suited our particular school at that particular time. But it's if you don't have a PE model that is holistic in nature, it's a great place to start. Head, hands, heart is another one that's equally as widely adopted now, and again, it allows you to use as a foundation, but then build upon it, and all of these holistic concepts that we're all talking about it within PE really sit on a foundation of something like me and PE that really puts emphasis on delivery through physical activity. And I think I can't say that enough, and people can't hear that enough, that PE, all of these changes that people like myself and Lee Sullivan are trying to champion within PE are not a replacement for the physical. We know that PE is uniquely placed as a physical subject, but it can be a physical subject that delivers real academic benefits as well as physical benefits when it's done effectively.
Yeah, I think that's probably a great place to kind of conclude and just wind up, is that, you've got a quote here near the end of the book saying, which we've spoken about already, that you wanted to move away from a very specific sport-focused approach, and more focus on specific physical movement skills. And that kind of leads nicely into the comment of to find the success within the failures, and to make sure that it's, I guess, not just about sport, like not just about the end goal. And like you mentioned, building blocks, it's more about the building blocks than sport being an end goal. I guess I started with 5 comments about yourself. Maybe if you could lead us out with, I guess, your kind of 5 tips, or just your 5 outlooks on PE and on it being a holistic, more skill-based subject, really.
Okay, yeah, put me on the spot there. Okay, so the first thing is that now is the time. I think now is the time to be experimental with PE. Now is the time to think creatively about it. There is so much research and so much really good writing out there by people in different contexts, in different geographical locations, and if you're at all interested in evolving your PE curriculum, there's so much support for you out there if you go looking for it on social media. So now is the time to do it. Don't be afraid. The worst thing that you can do as a PE teacher or a teacher in general is just assume that things are fine. Be inquisitive, be critical. Go out looking for things that you could do differently. Look for the things that you could do better. Talk to your pupils is probably the third one. Listen to them. I mean, obviously it's slightly harder when they're very, very little. But if you're a secondary PE teacher, we talk about student voice a lot now. And the best way to engage with challenging pupils or pupils that are disinterested is to listen to them and hear what they're telling you, and then create something that appeals to them. Never stop learning, I think is probably really important. And I have learned so much during the process of writing this book and everything that's gone around it. Talk to people, listen to people, learn from people. I would never say that I was an expert in this. There are people out there far more knowledgeable than me, and every day I read something that makes me think about things in a slightly different way. And then finally, and I guess most importantly, is never, ever forget that your pupils sit at the center of everything you do. And if you put your pupils at the absolute core of everything that you strive to achieve, then you can't go far wrong, because they are what this is all about. Yes, I wrote a book, I'm very proud of it. But really, I'm still a teacher in classrooms trying to do the absolute best for children, because that's what I wanted to do with my life. And I think teachers are great at doing that, but sometimes we can forget to keep children at the centre of everything we're doing, where we get wrapped up in research and all the stuff that goes around the outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree completely. I think you mentioned it at the beginning, it's giving them the skills to set them up for like success in life and not just in a lesson.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you very much. It was really, I mean, even as a teacher that does every single subject, it was a great book, and like it really resonates with me and like with my practice. And you're right, like if you don't start with the child, kind of where do you start from? So I just want to say thank you very much.
No problem.
And it's a great
Thank you
book,
for having me.
So yeah, no, definitely. Do you want to just maybe give us like the last elevator pitch, or just introduce the book to us? So if anyone wants to go out and get it.
Happiness Factories is available on Amazon, Waterstones, via the John Catt website. It's not the most expensive book that you'll buy this year. I think it's. I'm very proud of it. I don't know how many copies it's selling. I think it is selling some, so somebody's reading it somewhere. I hope it resonates with people, whether they're PE teachers or just teachers in general. I think that's really important, is that although it's a PE book, I think a lot of the messages echo across lots of areas of education. So, I hope people are enjoying it.
Yeah, it goes back to the beginning. I feel like you've taken the specialism out of PE and put it right there next to the maths and the Englishes and the sciences, and I think that's great, because people have such a small vision of PE. So I think, like, for me as a primary teacher, that was really amazing, and it kind of opened your eyes to it. So I'm very pleased that you enjoyed it. Yeah, no, for sure. Well, thank you very much. All right. And enjoy your PE in the rain tomorrow. Lovely, I will do. Thanks very much. Thanks so much, Phil. Have a great evening. Thank you. Bye. Bye. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, it really opened my eyes to the fact that actually PE is not a specialist subject, and if you can teach a math lesson, you can use the same skills for a PE lesson, and teach those skills in a PE lesson that can then in turn be used in all your other lessons. So it's a great way to look at PE, that it can benefit the whole rest of the curriculum, and that it's not just a standalone subject. So I think I'm going to leave you with this one quote, which is to find the successes within the failures, to look at those building blocks and not just an end goal of let's play a sport, which I think is really interesting. And let's develop lots of other skills through PE that you can then see within the rest of your curriculum. So Happiness Factories, published by John Catt and by Phil Mathe. So thank you very much for listening in, and I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you buy the book, which hopefully you will, I hope you enjoy the book. See you next time.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.